Hello viewers, and welcome to yet another special video production by Cardboard of the Rings, a bi-weekly podcast about the Lord of the Rings, the card game, which is a living card game by Fantasy Flight Games. As always, joining you today is Mitch, and with me is Matthew.
Hi everyone.
And this is one more entry in our LOTR LCG progression series. We've taken a look at two different spheres of influence for this game. We talked about the very versatile leadership and the very combat-focused tactics. And what exactly are we going to be covering in this video, Matthew?
Well, today is Spirit, and this is a sphere that emphasizes the strength of a hero's will. It's kind of a little more abstract sphere. They're focused on determination, resilience, courage, loyalty, and heart as being aspects critical to this sphere. My overall impressions or memories of this sphere as it relates to the core set is that it was definitely one of the more powerful spheres, whether it's questing or interacting with the encounter deck. So I think it's definitely almost needed in many ways to get through some of these quests.
Sure. I guess when I think of Spirit, I think of, in a word, prevention. So you're there to prevent questing unsuccessfully, so you're stopping players from having threat gain there. You're preventing shadow effects. You're canceling when-revealed effects. You're making sure no harm comes to anyone. So it gives a lot of control over the encounter deck, just like you said. And if Tactics specializes in combat, Spirit by far specializes in questing. So I guess we might as well go ahead and kick things off, just like all the previous videos, and begin with our hero card analysis. So when we talk about Spirit being good at questing, no other hero embodies that more than Aowen. So our first hero is at a cost of 9. She has a very impressive 4 willpower, 1 attack, 1 defense, and 3 hit points. She is a noble and Rohan, and if her 4 willpower wasn't already enough, her action is discard 1 card from your hand to give Aowen +1 willpower until the end of the phase. This effect may be triggered by each player, but limit once per round. And, obvious here is Aowen is the greatest questing character out of any heroes we've seen in the core sets. She scales according to the number of players in the game, so even though she's a little bit fragile, being able to contribute up to 8 willpower to the quest without any other card interactions is absolutely fantastic.
Right. Does any other hero have a base ability of 4? I can't think of one. At least in the core set. Yeah.
Right, and the only other hero that comes even close to 4 willpower is Glorfindel with 3.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's one of the top core heroes of any sphere, I think. Her ability is certainly handy. And I think what I like about her ability the most is that it helps you get rid of unique cards. So if you've already have the Horn of Gondor on someone, or the Steward of Gondor, unique attachments that you can't put on anyone else once some hero or character has it in play, her ability is a nice way to chuck those and still get some use out of it instead of having just dead cards sitting in your hand.
Right, so you can increase the probability of you getting those powerful, unique cards, and just like you said, it's no longer useless. It can generate a little bit more questing for you.
Right. So the second hero for the Spirit Sphere is Eleanor, who I think is the first of FFG's sort of made-up heroes. I don't believe she appears anywhere in the novels. Anyway, her threat cost is 7, her willpower is 1, her attack strength is 1, her defense strength is 2, and her hit points, she's got 3. She's both Gondor and noble, and her response reads, exhaust Eleanor to cancel the when revealed effects of a treachery card just revealed by the encounter deck. Then, discard that card and replace it with the next card from the encounter deck. I don't actually have a whole lot to say about Eleanor. I haven't played with her too much. Maybe, again, Gondor. She's a Gondor character. She might get some added utility with the current cycle. I think her ability is certainly helpful. The drawback, though, is that you don't just outright cancel it. You have to reveal the next one, which could be worse. You don't really know.
Yeah, it could be worse, it could be the same thing, it could be not as bad. It seems like a lot of people have kind of a love-hate relationship with Eleanor. or people just have a really strong opinion of her one way or the other. So she is only one of 2 ways in the game right now that we can cancel when revealed effects. She's an alright defender in that, if she doesn't have anything to cancel, she'll be ready to defend. She's got a couple defense. Maybe in case things go bad, you can cancel a nasty shadow effect dealt to her. But her card, it's replaced, so you have to reveal another card from the encounter deck. It's really good, I guess, if there's just a few treacheries you're really concerned about occurring. King Spider, for me, is one enemy with a when revealed effect that I find just really frustrating, where it's basically all players pick and exhaust a character. So occasionally Eleanor is going to save the day. Sometimes you're going to use her to cancel the Necromancer's Reach, and the next card's going to be the Necromancer's Reach. So,
Right.
I guess really the only other thing to say about her is there's no action window. So let's say during staging you've got Unexpected Courage on her. If you use her to cancel one card, if another card comes up you want to cancel, there's no window to ready her, so you're just going to have to eat that effect.
Yeah.
And then really the only combo that comes to mind for Eleanor is a card we're going to talk about, which is Strength of Will. And just like Dunhere, if she goes through questing without using her action, you could go ahead and exhaust her during travel in order to add a couple progress tokens to whichever location you decide upon.
Yeah.
And since I just mentioned him a moment ago, why don't we go ahead and cover the last spirit hero, which is Dunhere. He weighs in at 8 threat, with 1 willpower, 2 attack, 1 defense, and 4 hit points. He is both Rohan and Warrior, and his ability, unique to him, is Dunhere can target enemies in the staging area when he attacks alone. When doing so, he gets +1 attack strength. So in that way, he gets a little bit of a bonus beyond his threat cost. He definitely has low threat, which I like. He's able to eliminate low hit point enemies without taking any damage in return or risking suffering an attack. Something else that's nice is enemies that just have low defense he can kind of whittle away. So things like Dulguldur, Beastmaster, or Marsh Adder. And others he can try and kill outright, such as Goblin Sniper or Wargs. It's a little bit hard to boost his attack power beyond 3, but he's okay for a deck that's kind of built to play to his strengths.
Right, I think he's an excellent core hero, specifically for sniping. When we get cards in the Shadows of Mirkwood cycle that allow you to boost strength a little more easily, he becomes even better. Remembering back to the early days of the core set's release, I think his most famous use was getting rid of those nasty Hummer horns in the staging area. Their engagement cost is so high, it usually takes a while for them to come down. If you've got Dunhere, you have the time to sort of take those couple of turns to get them out of the staging area with his ability.
Yeah. I think he's really good with that leadership card, Common Cause. The same with Strength of Will, is if there's nothing that comes off the deck which you need to use, you can give his action to maybe make a little bit of additional questing progress, maybe ready a different character to get an attack or some card draw. If you can boost up his attack strength, he's all the better. Maybe if you combo him with something like Gandalf to finish off an already softened up enemy, he can be pretty good, but other than that, he's Dunhere.
Yeah. Which I guess leads us to our spirit allies, the first of which is Wandering Took, or Took, depending on how you want to pronounce that. He's got a cost of 2. All 3 of his stats, willpower, attack strength, and defense strength, are 1, and he has 2 hit points. He's a hobbit, and his text reads, Action. Reduce your threat by 3 to give control of Wandering Took to another player. Raise that player's threat by 3. I've said a few times in our progression series that when I first started playing the game, I was a solo player. So this was a card that was only included because I needed allies. I thought it was absolute junk. Once I started sort of getting a play group locally or playing on Octagon, this was still a card I've never really included. But I have to say, the videos, Mitch, that you and I made, this guy was actually not that bad. And in fact, he saved my butt a few times. So my value of the Wandering Took has really gone up as a result of our progression series. Still not sure I would include him in too many modern decks, but I definitely can respect and understand his value.
Yeah, I think there are quite a few little tricks you can use, like by reducing my threat by 3, increasing yours by 3. You can maybe do some tricks to do selective engagement, like if let's say there's, 2 Dulguldur Beastmasters in the staging area, or 3, whatever it happens to be. If we get one player with their threat above their engagement cost and the other below, you can make sure to get all the enemies on one side if one player's really designed for that, or can handle that. If one player's threat is getting way too high, you can do the Took to kind of control their threat a little bit. If you're using, say, Faramir, you can move all the Tooks to one side, use his ability to maximum effect. He can throw a chump blocker to your partner. And then really the only other thing worth mentioning for him is if you do have him blocking an attack, just like I mentioned in one of our videos, if he's going to be taking lethal damage, you can make sure that you trigger your action to get the threat where you want it to be before you ultimately resolve him dying. So, if you want to get that threat back or whatever it happens to be wandering to, can do a final bit of wandering before he finally hits the discard pile.
Right, and I always thought the threat thing was sort of prohibitive, but again, Spirit's really good at reducing threat, and so in many ways that becomes sort of a non-issue once we get to the events that can sort of help navigate that.
Alright, well, our next ally is the Lorien Guide. At a cost of 3, 1 willpower, 1 attack, 0 defense, and 2 hit points. It is Sylvan and Scout, and this is one of the only Sylvans we've seen in the core set, and its response is after Lorien Guide commits to a quest, place 1 progress token on the active location. So no matter what, you're always going to be making 1 progress, so long as you do have an active location. But there are kind of some pitfalls of this card, in that primarily it kind of works against one of the most powerful cards in the core set, what we're going to be talking about, the Northern Tracker. So before we talk about this card, why don't you go ahead and introduce the Northern Tracker to us, Matthew?
Sure. If we thought that Tactics was puny with only 4 allies, Spirit only has 3. So our final ally, the Northern Tracker, has a cost of 4, willpower of 1, attack strength of 2, defense strength of 2, and 3 hit points. So pretty good stats there. He's a Dunedain and a Ranger, and his response reads, after Northern Tracker commits to a quest, place 1 progress token on each location in the staging area.
Right. So why I wanted you to introduce that other ally here is, for example, the Northern Tracker. For 1 more resource, you gain an additional attack value, 2 more defense, an additional hit points, and, in my opinion, a much better effect. But what are your thoughts, Matthew?
I like both. I don't think that you'll be using the Northern Tracker too often for attacking or defending, so in many ways, I think those could be considered wasted
just
points or whatever. Yeah.
Superfluous.
Right. Maybe I shouldn't say completely wasted, because there may be times if you don't have any locations in the staging area, you could use him for someone else, of course. I think they're both useful, right? There's a lot of quests that force you to travel to a certain number of locations. You either have to accrue victory points, or you just must travel here to do something, in which case Lorien Guide could help you get through that a little more quickly, especially if you have to start off at that location or something. So I'm not debating that I think Northern Tracker is perhaps more powerful, but I think Lorien Guide is certainly helpful.
Yeah, I think Lorien Guide is probably most useful if you're, say, playing a solo game, so generally you're not revealing a whole lot. You want to keep your staging area pretty empty. Mm-hmm. The big concern for me is it seems like Lorien Guide, of course, wants locations to be traveled to, and there's quite a few different locations that have relatively nasty travel effects, like the Necromancer's Pass, I believe it's called, where you have to choose 2 random cards from your hand to discard. Northern Tracker, of course, avoids all of that. Right. We're very shortly going to be getting into the hunt for Gollum, and almost all of those locations are some sort of detrimental effect while they're active. So Northern Tracker can certainly target more locations, but in a very, one-player game or just a few players, you're a lot less likely to have locations sitting in the staging area. So it's kind of a tricky balance between these two, and for only having 3 allies, it seems like you're either playing the guide or the tracker, and probably not both.
Right, and that was going to be my point. You don't get 3 of the guide, the Northern Tracker in the core set. You do of the guide, and there's only 3 allies to choose from anyway. The Wandering Took, maybe all right, maybe not. So in the core set only, Spirit is really, as we said earlier, it's really more of a support sphere in that it's not pumping out a ton of allies, but the ones that can get out, either the guide or the tracker, they are pretty powerful.
And then really, the only closing thought I have is that whether you use Lorien Guide, whether you use Northern Tracker, or perhaps some unholy combination of them both, they both combo pretty well with something, say, Snowborn Scout, to maybe deal that last little point of quest progress to eliminate some sort of nasty location.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that about does it for our allies, so why don't we go ahead and transition to our spirit attachments.
Okay.
Starting off with the Favor of the Lady, which is pretty simple. Cost of 2, it is a condition attachment, and it reads, attached to a hero, attached hero gains +1 willpower. This is a relatively wimpy effect. I think overall attachments are probably a little bit safer than allies, so even though, say, the Wandering Took is a cost of 2 for a 1 willpower ally, it's probably a lot less likely to be killed by, say, Evil Storm or the Necromancer's Reach. So there's certainly a fair share of encounter cards that target attachments, but if you've got a lot of spirit resources coming in, this is probably a fairly safe investment.
Right, I think it's a solid card, especially for Aowen, right? That's going to bump her up to 5 willpower, which is just stellar. I think part of the reason I like this card so much is in large measure due to Brandon, because every time I see this card or think about this card, I call it, or think in my head anyway, the Flavor of the Lady. That's just one of those things from the early Cardboard of the Rings episodes that just still resonates with me today, and I laugh every single time.
All right. And then how about our next card?
All right, Power in the Earth. It has a cost of 1, and it attaches to a location, and the attached location gets -1 threat. We had quite a few tactics cards we weren't too keen on. This is definitely a spirit card that I am not too keen on, especially in conjunction with either Lorien Guide or the Northern Tracker. That's a much better way to get rid of locations than this. Maybe if it reduced it by 2 or 3, this would be a much better card, but just reducing it by 1, just discard a card to bump up Aowen and call it a day. That's how I feel.
I guess the price is right in some ways in that it's, 1 resource for 1 willpower equivalent, but considering that as soon as you travel to a location, it's contributing 0 threat, and that sometimes doesn't cost anything, the fact that this counts as you drawing a card for your turn really turns me off from it. Yeah. Northern Tracker is probably going to automatically deplete locations, so that 1 spirit resource may not seem like much, but I would definitely rather be saving up for a Northern Tracker or, say, have a resource kicking around for a cancellation effect.
Absolutely.
The one combo with this card, since there's not a lot of attachments like this that are very likely to show up in your discard pile, is Lore's Erebor Hammersmith. So, of course, if you do find yourself, for some reason, playing Power in the Earth, if you or maybe a partner plays Erebor Hammersmith, they could certainly return that to your hand, and but that's about that. So,
yeah.
Now that we've covered one of the less loved spirit attachments, why don't we go ahead and talk about probably the most powerful. So Unexpected Courage is a cost of 2, it is another condition, and it reads attached to a hero, action, exhaust Unexpected Courage in order to ready attached hero. So I think Brandon probably put it the best in one of the old Cardboard of the Rings episode, where he said something to the effect of, "Unexpected courage, for the cost of 2, gives you an additional copy of your strongest hero." Attachments are pretty hard to get out of play. Instead of playing something wimpy like Wandering 2 for 2, maybe all of a sudden Gimli gets to have 2 10 attack strength attacks every round or something like that.
Right, I think this is an auto-include in every single deck that has a spirit hero. It's one of the top core attachments.
Right.
Bar none.
I mean, just like people play leadership sometimes specifically for Steward of Gondor, this is probably one of the Power 9 leaderships. Guess what? 3 copies of giving you additional actions on all of your heroes. Really, the only downside to this card is that in some ways it's kind of like putting all of your eggs in one basket, but really, you don't want to pass up the opportunity to use this.
Yep, not at all. Well, that's it for the attachments, and so we are left with the events, and we're going to start off with one that I think is pretty good. It's the Galadrim's Greeting. At a cost of 3, it gives you the action, reduce one player's threat by 6, or reduce each player's threat by 2. I think it's a solid card. I think it's a staple of Spirit decks, certainly early in the game's history or life. I don't know if I've ever had anyone play this where we reduced each player's threat by 2. I think I've almost always seen it played, certainly in a solo game, and you're just reducing your own, but even in multiplayer games, it's pretty much, at least the folks I played with, it's almost always just reducing one player's threat by 6. But even if you reduced everyone's by 2, I still think it's a pretty good card.
Yeah. Something to keep in mind for this one is it's one of 2 different ways that we have to reduce threat. There's simply the Galadrim's Greeting and, of course, Gandalf. I do like that it scales a little bit based on players. Like in a 3-player game that reduce each player's threat by 2, it's breaking even for the amount of threat reduction. For 4 players, it pulls ahead a little bit. Generally, I do pick the drop by 6 option since there's, one player that's a little bit higher. You can certainly use it to, say, pull both players down below a threshold for Evil Storm or something like that. But, it helps your score if you're looking to do that. You can avoid threat-based encounter cards. Like, there's one I'm thinking of where it's, if every player's threat is 35 or higher, they have to discard a card. Really, the only downside to this is it's a little bit cost prohibitive, but It does what it is meant to do pretty well.
Yeah.
And I suppose that brings us to a less loved spirit event, which is Strength of Will. It is a cost of 0, but it is response. After you travel to a location, exhaust a spirit character to place 2 progress tokens on that location. So it does give you 2 progress tokens at no resource cost. You do have to exhaust a character, so I mentioned Eleanor and Dunhere are both very good contenders for this. But you do have to travel to a location, so maybe you're eating some sort of nasty effect. Maybe it's got a win active effect that's detrimental. And then having to exhaust a character is not the greatest. And 2 progress tokens will auto-explore some locations, but others, it's all right, but...
Yeah, I think this is a less useful event as far as spirit events are concerned. Especially, it's less useful, especially in conjunction, I think, with the guide and the tracker. Not a card I would include in a ton of decks. Unlike the next card, though, which is Hasty Stroke. At the cost of 1, its response reads, cancel a shadow effect just triggered during combat. Solid card, probably an auto-include in many spirit decks. I think the key thing with this card, though, is simply to remember to keep a resource open. This card does you no good if you have spent all your resources on the Northern Tracker or something.
Right. I think there's really nothing negative to say about this card. It's the only way we have to cancel shadow effects at the present moment. It's dirt cheap. It's insurance for taking undefended attacks. Save some heroes, save some allies, prevent just god-awful effects from triggering. It's Hasty Stroke.
Indeed.
And next is Will of the West. It is a cost of 1, and it is action. Choose a player, shuffle that player's discard pile back into his deck. This is an interesting card in that if you draw your entire deck, 2 copies allow you to continually recycle some of your best cards. So in case you have Barivore just working overtime with Aowen to churn through your deck, you can start playing your best stuff, continually start recycling it. Under most instances, all it's really doing is just, say, retrieving a couple copies of Hasty Stroke or a Test of Will into your deck on the off chance that you'll draw them. And really, ever since Barivore was nerfed so that she only can use her ability once per round, the odds of drawing through your deck using only the core cards is really pretty slim. So,
right. I mentioned in our tactics review video that I'm not the fancy, let me find a 10-card combo that breaks, every quest known to man. This to me would fall sort of in that category. Once I played a card, I'm done with it. And if I don't get it back, well, that's just how the game works. I don't think I've ever used it, at least not when I've been constructing decks and not just using the pre-constructed solo sphere decks. I think it could be useful, certainly in certain types of decks, those combo seeker decks, but, it's not a card for me.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit before the show about Nightmare Mode, and where you've got, your discard pile in between scenarios is not shuffled back into your deck. This would certainly be very useful for that.
Absolutely.
But really, just the way that you're talking about it, even, say, damage in this game, so long as your heroes or allies don't end up killed, as long as you can pace yourself appropriately, you don't necessarily need to remove that damage. You don't need to get everything in your discard pile back. You just need to make sure that you use what you have sparingly and smartly enough to make it through the quest.
Absolutely. And I think we're back to another fantastic event. We're sort of going back and forth. Fantastic, auto-include, and not so great. Auto-include, not so great. Well, we're back to an auto-include, I think, with a Test of Will. It's cost of 1, and its response reads, cancel the when revealed effect of a card that was just revealed from the encounter deck. Again, it's another Spirit staple. Just like Hasty Stroke, you want to make sure that you have a resource open, especially because the Spirit allies are somewhat pricey, so you really do have to balance, am I going to get some allies on the table, or do I need to save these events in case something disastrous happens? So you have to be a little bit more cautious than me, right, when I just want to play every tactics ally that I can as soon as I can, right, along with my attachments. But it's really a fantastic card. I think you'd be sort of silly to not include it in your deck.
Sure, I think there's nothing more to be said. So I'll just move on to our next event, which is Stand and Fight. It is our only X cost event, and it is action. Choose an ally with a printed cost of X in any player's discard pile. Put that ally into play under your control, and the chosen ally can belong to any sphere of influence. So this is a very interesting card, as in the more players you're playing with, the more targets you have. Even if you're just going through a lot of allies yourself, this is kind of a wild card in some ways, where if you've got a Wandering Took in your discard pile or a Snowborn Scout, it's just like drawing a copy of that. So the longer games go on, the more options you get. You can use tricks like pulling a Snowborn Scout back into play to snipe locations, use it to chump block, and then say, stand and fight it again. If you want to run something like you're playing 3 Spirit Heroes and you include Bjorn in your deck, you can discard him to Aowen, and then you can stand and fight using purely Spirit resources to get Bjorn into play.
Right. If you guys have been watching each video of the progression series, I think that the only thing I want to say about Stand and Fight is, and I'm glad Mitch stressed the word any, and his example was Snowboard Scout.
Right.
You kind of have to remember who is in whose discard pile. I mean, of course, in a real, paper game, you can just look through your buddy's discard pile at any time. But that Snowborn Scout might have helped. My discard pile might have helped us out. But I think it certainly can be a useful card as long as you remember which allies are in the discard piles.
Yeah, and then really the only other thing is allies have to be in discard piles first of all. So if you're doing well, drawing this card might not really do too much for you if there are no allies in play, or they're just allies you're not interested in. I know, a lot of your veteran axe hands and things like that, I don't have too much interest in pulling over to my side of the board. And
What?
probably probably the biggest thing for this guy is there's an FAQ entry where it basically rules that neutral characters do not belong to a sphere of influence, therefore you cannot stand and fight a powerful character like Gandalf.
Yeah, that's a shame, but, it is what it is. Let's see, next card, A Light in the Dark. I also remember what Brandon used to call this card, but for the sake of moving along, I think we'll just let that slide. Listen to the early episodes if you want. Its action reads, choose an enemy engaged with a player, return that enemy to the staging area for a cost of 2. Not as good as Feint, certainly, especially since there's a whole bunch of enemies that have engagement effects. So if it engages with you, something nasty happens. If you send them back to the staging area, they're going to engage with you again the next turn, and something nasty is going to happen. For Spirit, though, that doesn't have a whole lot of attack power or maybe even defense power, if you're only a turn or two away from beating the quest, perhaps this is helpful. Otherwise, I just don't think it's all that great of a card.
Yeah, it can definitely buy you some time, and in certain instances, it's not really important that you kill, every enemy in play. So being able to just dump enemies back into the staging area can be kind of useful, but really, it's awfully expensive for a card that just delays the inevitable. So
Right.
unless you're relying on Dunhere to take a swing at that enemy and, miraculously kill it, it's really not doing a whole lot other than sapping your resources and making sure you've got a quest against more threat the following turn.
Right. I suppose that if you send it back in hopes that if you're playing a multiplayer game, that one of your partners can grab it the next time so you don't have to deal with it, that could, of course, be helpful, but I'm just not sure it's something I would include.
Sure. And then I guess our next card here is Dwarven Tomb. For a cost of 1, it is action. Return 1 spirit card from your discard pile to your hand. So it's a pretty cheap recursive effect here. Some good targets are, of course, a Test of Will, Hasty Stroke, Galadrim's Greeting, for if you're just really overwhelmed by nasty shadow effects or wind revealed effects, or you just really need to drain your threats. It allows one spirit player to potentially do something like drop 36 threat in one game, or cancel 6 shadow effects or wind revealed effects. So it's definitely useful. I think the problem with Dwarven Tomb is if you've got plenty of card draw, if you already have plenty of Hasty Strokes or a Test of Will, it's not really doing anything for you.
Right. I don't think I have much more to add to what you said, Mitch. So that leads us to our final event card for the Spirit Sphere, which is Fortune or Fate, with a hefty cost of 5. So it better be a good effect here, right? The action reads, choose a hero in any player's discard pile. Put that card into play under its owner's control. Well, in our first attempt at Journey Along the Anduin, this might have been quite helpful if Mitch would have been able to play it. Otherwise, it's sort of similar to Stand and Fight in some ways, but I think it's probably just too expensive and situational.
The thing for this one, for me, is it's cool that it's really the only resurrection effect we've seen in the entire game, but the problem is it is massively expensive, and similar to Brock Ironfist in the leadership sphere, I really hate to deck build, keeping in mind that I'm planning on losing a hero. So it's definitely disastrous when a hero does die. This can help things, but you have to ask yourself, I've lost a hero, I'm going to be investing 5 resources. By the time that hero who returns to play with 0 resources, none of the attachments they had, are they going to end up making enough of a difference that this huge investment is going to, miraculously allow the players to recover?
Right. This is a card that was only a one of in the core set. And, I haven't played a whole lot of 3 or 4 player games. I've certainly played some, but not with the core set only cards. I would wonder if this card was perhaps more effective in a 4-player game, where if you lose a hero, the other 3 could sort of limp along for a little bit, and this card could then be played, and then you're back up to full strength. But in a 1-player game, certainly, or a 2-player game, I think probably it's a lot less helpful.
Yeah, it's definitely a card where I would imagine if you've got a powerful deck, maybe 4 times out of 5, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be drawing this card and it's just going to be dead in your hand.
Yeah.
Maybe ideally there'll be, say, a spirit character with Steward of the Gondor. They'll be able to just dump this card into play immediately and save the day, but more often than not, I think it's just going to be a waste of space in someone's deck.
Yep, I agree.
Well, I think that about covers it. So, do you have any closing thoughts about Spirit here? So now that we've looked at all the cards, any particular strengths or weaknesses stand out for you?
It's all about questing, and it's all about interacting and canceling the nasties from the encounter deck. I think back in the heyday of the core set, Spirit was maybe the strongest sphere when it came to a lot of things, because they're just, if you're not playing Spirit, you just really, for the most part, can't interact with the encounter deck at all. And so it was very powerful. I think it's still a powerful sphere today, with a lot of these core cards that still remain really relevant.
Spirit is definitely a sphere where I view it as a lot of staples, so I'm really hesitant to approach any scenario without some way of canceling when revealed effects or some sort of contingency plan for if I get really nasty shadow cards. It's really hard to compare to Spirit's absolutely, just amazingly high willpower values. It just really can't be matched by anything else in the core set. Really, the only problem with Spirit is, just like Tactics specializes in combat, they are so laser focused on questing and prevention effects that if you do get some really nasty enemies in play, you're probably going to be pretty hard pressed to deal with any of it. So if you've got a hill troll bearing down on you, you're definitely not going to really be able to do anything with a mono Spirit deck.
Absolutely.
But I think that about does it. So unless you've got any other closing thoughts, Matthew, I suppose we might as well go ahead and end our video here. So, as always, thank you guys so much for checking out yet another entry into the LOTR LCG progression series. If you liked this video, be sure to go ahead and click that like button or subscribe to our channel. Feel free to leave some comments in the comment section below, letting us know if you've thought of any uses for some of these cards that slipped our minds, or you've just had any particularly awesome uses of some of these, Spirit staples. So next episode, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the lore sphere, and that's going to conclude our analysis of the core set. So, thank you guys for watching, and see you next time.
Thanks so much.